So moving on, we would actually add a username field to our authentication view now. So let's just go to the auth view, and here we have defined all of the fields. So just below the email field, let's add another field for private var. It should be called username field, and the F should be capital. Now what we can do is it would conform to the type some view, open the curly braces, would add a text field here, and this text field would actually contain username and the text property, which would be a binding with the class view model dot. So I don't think so we have a username yet. So how about we copy this out, paste it here, call it username, copy this again, go back to our screen, add username here, and then we can have a foreground color or something like this only. Let's just copy paste and remove certain things. So font and all is fine, background color can be clear at all times, so I don't think so we need such specific things here. Corner radius should be 10, overlay, auto capitalization, keyboard type let's remove, and disable auto correction is true. That is fine because like username can be grammatically incorrect or something. Now what we could do is we have this username field, and inside the v stack we could add this condition that if view model dot show sign in view equals false, or you could do it the shorthand way using an exclamation mark right here, but okay. And we can have the username field here. So I guess that would actually configure it in a way that if it's in the sign up view it would show us the username field, else it won't show up as the username field. So we'll quickly test this out, but let's just go inside our sign up function right now, because since we have added a field for the username, we would need to create the user in such a way also. So earlier we were just using user ID, email, but now we would also have a field for username, and this would be username, which is a property defined here. Let's go back and let's also add a timestamp, basically date created, so it can help us in future to sort out like what time the users joined, in the sense that who is an older user and who is newly joined. So you know, when someone newly joins, you could show them some of the previous created users on the platform so they could connect with them or sorts. So what's good is that this timestamp value, from what I know, is actually I guess it's a, I think it's not Swift defined, but instead, yeah, it's of the type Firebase library function, and it basically gives us a timestamp, and it directly works fine with Swift language actually. So what we could do now is that, you remember we had a model for user data. This is for the auth user data, right? So now we could do another model which would be of the type database user, and let's just create this. I don't think so we need no, we don't really need any imports. So we could start with structure, we could start with a struct and name this database user. Database user should be of the type codable, and then we can have some properties. So it should be date created, which would be of the type date. So yeah, this I was talking about. So the Firebase timestamp method is actually directly compatible with the date functionality inside Swift. So this is helpful for us. so we don't really need to change things up. And we can have let user ID, which would be again of the type optional string, and then we can have username, which would of the type string as well. So now that we have done this much, let's just write an extension on the date formatter, because since we are getting back a date, we would actually have to show it in a way of, let's suppose call it user friendly way, because it needs to have it needs to be compatible with the string type in order to show on the screen. I mean, we could use a basic formatter, but like if we have our own custom formatter which you are seeing right now, it's easy to create only because we could select a specific date style from here, and then we could give it a medium style because we don't need a time code with it as well. The date join could be simply just you know uh, what day, so in terms of day, month and year, and we could keep this short, and we can have return formatter, and this functionality should work. Okay, so this much is done. What else we need to do now is that we go inside our main view model, and inside our main view model, now I will show you a much easy way to configure this thing out. Like right now we are creating a dictionary of sorts. What we would do now is we would create a published va um, database user, which would be of the type database user optional, give it a default value of nil, and inside our sign up function we would need to have let's say we have user data, we have create a document in Firestore. You're creating a document here, we have db. What we could do is we can create let database user, and we could have database user, and it will have its auto initializer since it's a struct, and we could have give it a date, we could give it an email which would be here itself, user id would be let me think about it, the user id, and I guess the email should also be user data dot email, and because the user data we are getting back from authentication, and user id should be user data dot uid, this is there, and then we would need finally the username that the user is entering. So now that we have done this much, instead of creating the dictionary, we could do try db dot collection, we could enter users here, now we could have dot document, and let's inside of it let's add user data dot uid, again the same thing, and this time we would do set data, and it would be from database user, and we would do merge as false, and hence we don't really need to perform this functionality now from what I know. And we can cross this out, and it gives us this error that cannot convert a value of type database user to argument type. Okay, this makes sense. It says try db.collection, we have users, then this document user data.id dot set data, and I think it is not referencing to a right function of ours from what I understand. So for that purpose we would actually need to import Firestore, not combine, I guess it should be Firestore Swift, and it should be Firebase Firestore Swift, and it says that we don't have a package like this. Okay, Firestore, Firebase Firestore we have, but we don't have the Swift equivalent to that. But let's just check, is it working now or not? So I think it's not anymore throwing us any error, so good for us. And now that we have done this much, what we could do now is let's do a shift command K to try a clean build to see if the functionality is working better. And okay, so I think it's building fine. Meanwhile, what we could do is actually create few more functions. So if we do command option left arrow, it folds the entire thing. Now what we could do is we can have another functionality which would be private, and we would call it private func fetch database user. And how will we fetch a database user is basically we would use the ID, since you notice that while creating a user we are setting up the UID for referencing that user. So every user can be fetched with their ID. So we can add a parameter name, a function argument name with UID, and we can have UID here as well. So it would be the internal argument, and it would be of the type string. This would be an async function, so async throws, and it would give us a database user. And let's open this function up. What it would do is it would declare a DB from firestore dot firestore. Then we can return it, so we can have try await, and then we can have tv dot collection. Inside collection it would have to search for users. Inside users it would search for a document. That document needs to have the UID which we are taking in as the argument, and we would then get that document as a database user dot self. Hence we declare database user as of type codable, because now we are actually parsing the request we get back from the Firestore, and we use it as a database user. Just below here we would actually need to write the function to use this async function. Because it's an async function, we would actually wrap it up inside another public function which could just call it inside a task object. So it makes it easier for us to directly call inside our view. So fetch database user, and we do guard let UID equals auth dot auth, and then we would get the current user out of here, and we would get its UID, else we return. So what are we doing here? Basically, this function requires a UID. How do we get a UID? So we are fetching the current user from the Firebase um, auth functionality. The class, it actually caches the current user in its own storage, and thus we can actually just access it like this. Now what we would do is we will start a task. The task would be opened inside. We would have a do block, then it would be a let database user, and this would be try await fetch database user. It's just the function that we just have written above, and actually, yep, this is it. Now what we do is that we open a dispatch queue, because now that we have fetched a database user, the next and foremost thing to do is actually populate our publish to our property. So self.database user would be equal to database user, and we could just have a print property here as well, and we could say fetch user, and this would be of the type database user. So let's just print it out to see what all we are getting here. We can have a catch statement here which would just print if suppose we have an error fetching the user, and the error would be error dot localize description. Now that we have done this much, we could actually, we could try it out in the sense that um, let's just do some modifications inside our user profile view. So basically it is really simple at this point. So what we could do is just write a private function here, formatted date, or we could move this function inside the view model as well. But for now, let's just keep it here. So you would notice what I'm doing. Basically what it does is that it uses our date formatter that we just wrote. It takes in a date value and gives us a string. So if you remember, we had this date formatter extension, and I think it won't come up because date formatter is of the type, or maybe no, I think it's inside SwiftUI as well. So formatter date formatter dot user friendly function that we just wrote, not this, it should be user friendly. I have some doubts as if why is it not coming up, and okay, this makes sense that it is not working. And we can have a string, and this should be date, but then it is not catching it up, so not very sure. Okay, so it is, but somehow my Xcode is not recognizing it, so it's white in color, but although it's working. So okay, for simplicity's sake, we can come here now and we have a V stack, and then we had a navigation link. But what we could do now is we can create an edge stack here. Inside the edge stack, what we could do is we can have a text property. It just says profile for now, so giving it a bit more of, some foreground. We could add some foreground color. We could have white here because I was thinking to give it the color black for now. And we are slowly shifting towards the design I had in my mind. So I expected our profile view to actually be white in color, so that's what we are doing right now. Fonts dot bold is the name. We can have a size 18 here. Now we could add some padding, like suppose 6 pixels. Then we can have some background, and the background should be color UI color, and then it should be okay. So we could have mild yellow or something, but I was just thinking that how about we add like few new colors. So I mean, I was thinking that we have lot of yellows, but not really useful for us in a way that we don't really want to make our whole app yellow. So there's this neon color which I saw online, and I had checked it out. It's not exactly yellow in color, you would notice just right now, because we would use these colors inside our profile view. And for the hex, it's DFFF, and it's 32. This one is done. Let's add one more function, and it would be like this. It returns a UI color. It opened up. We return UI color. We add hex to it, and then we have 0x327 and 8ff. So I think I got both of these colors from, I guess, Behance itself, and I found them good, so I am using them. And for mid gray, we could have something like a UI color, and we can return a UI color which would be hex, and the hex value would be 0 cross 1a 1a 1a. So yeah, these were the three new colors that I wanted to add. And instead of using mild yellow here, how about we let's just go for the blue color now. Blue Crayola, as what was written on the the Behance website. So let's just give it a clip shape now. The clip shape would be a rounded rectangle with a corner radius of like 20 pixels. And let's just give it a padding overall outside as well of 4. Then we can have a spacer, and below the spacer we can have our navigation link. So we can copy this whole thing out, put it here, so this becomes the header of our entire thing. And basically, now that we have added this much, you can have a frame width of not exactly infinity now, because like we have what do you say, we have added two things on the edge stack, so they would have a spacer in between and they're pushing each other. So navigation when link would actually, that a gear circle would actually try to be on the left side of the view in the short space it has been assigned. So in order to fix that, let's just change it a bit as well, because like right now it only has an icon. So what I would do is keep this thing out from here. The color should be white now because the background is black. It should be bold. We don't need the font size anymore. And we could try by adding edit text here, and the edit text should have a font, and the font would be of the custom type. Again, it would be fonts dot bold, sorry, and we could give it a size 14. And then we can have a foreground color of dot white, so you could use foreground style as well. Okay, we can have a padding of like 4 pixels or something, and we can have a background to them, and this background will have a rounded rectangle with a corner radius of 12 with a foreground color of clear. Okay, so not very sure, should we keep it clear or should we keep something like uh, white? I mean, clear won't really make any sense, right? Let's just give it a frame width of like 120, so it has enough space for the text and the icon. And instead of clear, let's just do here as well, we can have color UI color dot blue Crayola again. Now that we have done this much, we have a frame width as well. What we could do is we can keep the padding to horizontal, oops, horizontal with 2, and we can remove the frame from here. And now we can finally close our edge stacks. So now that we have done this much, let's open another edge stack, and this time we would add some more stuff. So basically it would have a text, and this could have add the rate value, and then we could plus it with the value we get back from our view model dot database user dot username. And if it is nothing, then we can add nil, and we can have a font size, again custom, and it would be fonts dot bold with size 30. Let's say, I think it's quite huge, but let's just try. And we can have a foreground color, and it would be a color with a UI color which would be of the type neon yellow. Now that we have done this much, how about we add another thing here, which would be the user ID. So let's give it a hashtag, we give it plus, and then we again add it with view model dot database user dot user ID, else it would be nil as well. and we can just copy this thing out as well, and we could instead give it a small size of 8 or something. And thus we have done this much. You can have a frame with a max width of, let's say, infinity, not in it but infinity, and then we can have an alignment of leading. So we are added this inside our H stack. How about we do it inside a V stack, I would say. I mean, that could look good as well. And instead of, okay, what we could do is let's just add them inside a V stack, because we just want to see if the whole thing is working or not. And on Z stack, let's add an on appear functionality. So this on appear, we would have view model dot fetch user data, and since fetch user data internally handles the asynchronous function, we don't really need to call it inside any of the task closures or something. So this much we have done. How about we try running the functionality now and see if it is actually creating the database user and then fetching it. I think it might just fail in the first attempt because our database user has completely changed from what it used to be. So I'm just hoping that it does not crash or something. We could just delete this document for now, and we could type in users and we can delete. So we don't really need it anymore because we have added a whole new set of things. And how about, okay, we can just wait for it to build, and most probably it won't work. Let's just see what happens. Could be that it signs us out because it cannot find a valid database user, but let's just see what happens. So inside the application finally, and okay, it gives us this and it says error fetching the user. The data could not be read because it is missing. Okay, makes sense. This looks kind of bad right now, but we will properly make it work. So now we could have our first proper user, I would say. Like, I was thinking of having some anime characters like Crollo and characters from Hunter x Hunter, if you guys have seen that. And let's add the password as password itself. Oh, it's the username, my bad. So also wanted to check this out. Okay, so if you are in the sign up page only, then it shows up, otherwise it does not show up. So the username should obviously be Crollo, and it does not have a W, so it's Crollo. And the password should be password. So let's just sign this person up, and it should sign up and it fetches it perfectly. So okay, we are creating a user, it's working fine. Let's refresh here and let's just see what all data we populated our user with. It's taking like few seconds to build up, but there it is. Now we see date created is being shown, and the reason why I wrote a date formatter was because it adds this extra timing with the standard timing plus, because I'm in India right now, so it says UTC plus 5:30 for us. So I did not want to have this entire thing, that's why I wrote that formatter. And we could try printing that date also, since we have written it down well. So let's just try this out as well. How about inside the V stack that we have added, we add a text and we call it date created, and inside of here we would have formatted date with a view model dot database user dot date created. So hopefully this should work for us. And it says, okay, it's optional. So default would be is asking for a default value, so let's just give it an empty date value. Let's just see what happens. So if we run this, I think hopefully it should give us the date of today itself, so we won't really know if this was working or not, since even in this case or in this case it would have, okay, so not really sure if okay, is it that it's blacked out or something. How about I run this again? I think I did not set the font and the foreground color, so it was assuming that the phone is in light mode. So okay, so it gives us a date created 8th October 2024 at 12:42 p.m. So it's 12:44 right now. So I suppose that it's taking the time from the database user as only, and the formatted date is working fine. So we can remove it for now because I don't think so people really need to see uh, when was this user created, but they definitely need to see like when did they join. I mean, that would be like a good functionality. I think Twitter shows it as well. So now that we have done this much, it's time that we would actually work on the UI a bit, and we would modify the whole screen so it looks better, because right now it looks really bad. So what we could do now is that we can work with some paths and shapes in Swift UI so that we can create a good looking UI for our user profile view. And for that also I took some inspiration, like what UI should I create from Behance. So you could do that too for your app, or you could just follow along with this course to see how I do it. So we would create a custom shape of our own and use it inside our user profile view. So it would be a fun learning experience working with Swift UI shapes. Guys, I hope to see you in the next video, and if you have any doubts, anything regarding this whole video, you could just leave them down in the comments. I would be happy to help you. Thank you.